The new test wizard allows you to create a test by pulling random questions by question type or by using question information, but it has some limitations. You can only use it to create tests. You can't use it to pull random questions into an existing test or another set. If you want to pull random questions from multiple sets or tests, you can't control how many questions come from each individual set or test. Finally, the new test wizard is only available to instructors, so publishers can't use it to pull random questions when assembling content. In this video, we'll look at how to use the Add by Criteria function to do some things not available in the new test wizard. We'll be looking at this as an instructor, but keep in mind that this functionality is also available to publishers. Also, we'll be using the Add by Criteria feature to build tests and pull questions from sets, but you can use it to pull questions from sets or tests into other tests or sets as well. Let's get started. In this example, I want to create a midterm by pulling 2 random multiple choice questions from chapters 1, 2, and 3. I also want to pull these questions based on difficulty level. First, let's look at the content and see what types of questions and question information are included. We'll open chapter 1 and check. I'll click the View Question Information button. I'll turn on Difficulty and References. This content has difficulty level and it also has a chapter reference. This will allow me to pull questions based on difficulty level, and it will also let me see which question set my questions came from once they're in the test. Keep in mind that the content you're working with may have different question information available. Now let's create a new test using the wizard. I'll give my test a name and accept the My Test folder as the save location. Since I want to pull random questions based on difficulty level, I'll choose the Question Information option. I'll select all 3 of the chemistry sets to pull the questions from. I'll select Difficulty from the Question Information drop-down list. I'll choose Multiple Choice from the Question Type list. I want 2 medium difficulty level questions from each of the 3 chapters, so I will enter 6 in the medium row. We'll finish building the test by clicking Next and then Finish. Let's display the question information in the test and see if we ended up with 2 questions from each chapter. It looks like we have 3 questions from chapter 1 instead of 2. When you use the new test wizard to pull questions from more than one set or test, the questions become one large pool, and the wizard pulls questions randomly from that larger pool rather than from the individual sets or tests. Let's see how we can get 2 random questions from each of the chapter sets. We'll start by creating a new test. I'll give my test a name, and this time I'll build an empty test because I'm going to use the Add by Criteria feature to select my questions instead of the new test wizard. Now I'll right-click Chapter 1 and select Add Questions by Criteria. In the Add Questions by Criteria dialog box, you can add multiple filters to search for questions. The first criteria I want to use is difficulty level. Depending on the type of criteria you choose, the available operations will change. For this example, I'll keep the operation as contains and enter the value medium. I'll add another filter so I can narrow my search to multiple choice questions. I'll select question type as the filter criteria and multiple choice as the filter value. I can choose Match All Filters to select questions that only match all of the filter criteria rows, or Match Any Filters to select questions that match any of the filter criteria. Since I want questions that are both multiple choice and of medium difficulty, I'll keep Match All Filters selected. Next, I'll click Get Question Count to see how many questions match my criteria. I can see that there are 8 questions that meet my criteria. I only need a couple of questions, so I'll enter 2 in the number of questions to add. You don't have to click Get Question Count before you enter the number of questions you want to add, but it helps you to be sure that there are enough questions that match your criteria. You will always be notified if you try to add more questions than what matches your criteria. Now, let's click OK and add the questions to the test. I'll turn on the references so I can verify that I have the right mix of questions from the chapters. I have 2 questions from Chapter 1. Now we'll select the Add by Criteria option for Chapter 2. I'll select the same criteria for question type and difficulty level as I did for Chapter 1. I'll check the question count to see how many questions meet my criteria. There are 6 questions that meet my criteria. That's more than what I need, so I'll enter 2 and click OK. I now have 2 questions from Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. I'll use the Add by Criteria dialog box one more time to add the final 2 questions from Chapter 3. Now I have a random mix of 2 medium difficulty multiple choice questions from chapters 1 through 3. Another use for the Add by Criteria feature is when you want to add more random questions after you've already created a test. Let's look at an example. I'm going to create a quiz on Chapter 1 that contains 5 random multiple choice questions. I'll give my quiz a name and keep the first build option selected, which is the Select by Question type option. I'll enter 5 in the number selected column in the multiple choice row. Notice that there are 15 multiple choice questions available in Chapter 1. Now I have a quiz with 5 questions drawn randomly from Chapter 1. Suppose that I decide that I want 5 more random questions for my test. I can't use the wizard to do that because it can only be used to create a new test, but I can use the Add by Criteria option instead. I want to filter by question type and select multiple choice. I'll click Get Question Count. Notice that there are 10 questions available. You'll remember that when we ran the new test wizard, there were 15 questions available. Since we added 5 questions using the wizard, there are only 10 questions that match our criteria remaining to select from. I'll click OK to pull 5 of the remaining 10 questions. Now I have a test with 10 questions that were pulled randomly from Chapter 1. A final way you can use the Add by Criteria feature is to pull random questions by multiple criteria. Let's open Chapter 1 and take a closer look at its question information. I know that this content includes topic information, so let's click Topics to display it. Suppose that I want to pull 5 questions at random that have a difficulty level of medium and deal with the topic of measurement. Let's look at our options with the new test wizard. I'll select the second build option that allows me to select by question information and click Next. Notice that in the question info dropdown, I can only select one piece of question information. In the wizard, I can select questions either by difficulty level or topic, but not both. To do that, I'll need to use the Add by Criteria feature. So let's back up in the wizard and create an empty test instead. Now I'll open the Add by Criteria dialog box for Chapter 1. Now I can filter for questions that have medium difficulty level. And the topic of measurement. I'll get the question count. There are 8 questions available. I only want 5, so that's great. I'll click OK and have a test with the right mix of questions. And that's just some of the ways you can use the Add by Criteria feature to select random questions for a set or test.